Hello, hello. We are
Hey,
live on the internet. How's everyone doing?
good. How you doing, Sam?
Great.
Good,
How you
good.
doing, Chris?
Doing great. Appreciate you joining us, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to be
All
here.
right. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. Here actually means a few things because we are live on Twitch on our Coded Live. We are also live on YouTube on our Sitefinity channel as well as on LinkedIn. So, glad you're here,
No,
and
no,
we are
no pressure, huh, Sam?
no pressure. We are your hosts for the day, Chris and me. So I'm Sam. I mostly come from a dev background, run the developer tool side of our family at Progress. And Chris?
Yeah, I'm. My name is Chris Knepp. I'm a partner manager on the Sitefinity side. I've been in the sort of the DXP world for going on 20 years now.
Oh, yeah, you are young.
Yeah, doesn't feel that way.
All right. And with us today, we are delighted to have our good friend and beloved Progress champion, Jeff. How are you, sir?
Good. How you guys doing?
Yeah, we are hanging in there. Jeff, where are you joining us from? Which
Yeah.
part of the
So
world?
yeah, I'm at the Silvertech headquarters, which is based in Bedford, New Hampshire.
Okay, so
Um,
same time zone.
Same time
Yeah,
zone.
yeah.
Back home from a
Yeah.
great week in Ireland with the Progress team and back adjusted. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff and I are only about 20 minutes away from each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Good to know. I am still East Coast, but I'm kind of borderline, getting closer towards Central Time. I'm Northwest Pennsylvania, so
Oh, okay.
I can drive maybe an hour and a half west, and then I can cross the time zone. But
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. Kind of.
all right,
Sam is
so
Sam is actually in an area where I grew up.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so he's
Oh, nice.
my family lives up in that area, so it's
Is that up by like Erie, Pennsylvania,
yeah,
like that
yeah,
area, right?
yep,
Yeah.
by the lakes,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
Yep.
it's
I got
beautiful
lost
for.
driving. Got lost driving through there one time. I ended up by I think Welch's is up there, right?
It is. It is.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. We like to call it. It's like the mistake on the lake where you need to stop for gas or recharge your car.
I think I did
But
stop for gas. Yeah, now that you mention it.
all right. Anyways, I got a little bit of background music going, and let's see. Our friends are starting to show up here. Joe or Jose, hi.
yeah,
Aztec Consulting, hello, hello. Good to see you. Good to see you.
yeah.
Well, today, thankfully, you're not stuck, seeing me code and fail at it and nothing compiling. Today, we are going to have a good conversation. So let me actually bring Jeff up here. So why don't you start by introducing yourself, Jeff?
Yeah, certainly. So, hey, everyone, Jeff McPherson. I'm Chief Growth Officer here at Silvertech. I've been part of this and in this industry it's been a long time, 25 years now. So I think I outdate Chris by a
Yeah.
couple of years there. But one of the partners here at Silvertech, we're a digital agency based in the Northeast. We also have a location in Indianapolis, Indiana. We've been in business for about 30 years. Back in the old days, we were an original partner with Telerik way back when. Took a little bit of a pause in the middle there, and then once Progress made the acquisition, became a partner. Gosh, it's probably been about 8 or 9 years now. So. And so yeah, so my role is really focused on business development, growth, accounts growth, our overall strategic vision, where we're going, all of which is really key to our partnership with Sitefinity.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. It's not often that we get, names and years dropped on us, but yeah, it looks like both of you have been at this for a while. I remember the early days when we, back in the Telerik days, because we don't talk about that too often. Telerik is it's a brand name for us. It's a product line, but the company used to be called Telerik back in the days. But yeah, that's where things started. Yeah.
It's great. Jeff, you had mentioned, obviously I know you guys are a digital agency. Can you maybe, what are some of the services you guys provide as a digital agency to some of your clients? Oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Chris, you were kind of breaking up. You were
Sorry.
breaking up a little bit on my, but that's okay. I think you were asking about what are some of the other services that we provide and so forth.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the services as a digital agency you provide to your clients?
Yeah, you bet. So we're a full service digital agency. So what that really means is your typical web development, website builds, and so forth. But it's much more than that. I would like to kind of preface it with one of the methodologies that we really have created over the years and kind of subscribe to is kind of this lead to loyal methodology, where our accounts team, our strategy team, and our team leads are really focused around, which is when we get engaged with a customer, it's really about understanding the entire life cycle of their customer base. And that could be a customer, it could be a member, within an association, it could be an internal employee. But it's about understanding kind of all the various touch points that user or that customer is going to engage with on that particular brand. So, our services are broken up into, yes, the traditional web build, which is, the engineering teams, both front end and back end, the creative teams, but also the strategy and digital marketing team. So understanding on the strategy side, the personas and the user journeys and kind of the organizational goals of the customers that we're working with. What are they trying to achieve, and how does the technology side of it really fit into it? I think for us, we're really focused around understanding how we either help our customers or actually create kind of those digital roadmaps for them. What does their tech and Marcom stack look like? How do we leverage those tools to really, identify kind of where the ROI is going to be, where the engagement is going to be. So, when I say full service, it is about understanding kind of their customer, adding the digital marketing services to it, the technology services to it, and then of course making sure that things like managed services, security, and so forth are all part of that.
Okay, so you said a lot of things in there, Jeff, but let me try to unpack here. So I come from a dev background. So when you say a dev's tech stack, that makes sense. Like, here are the technology pieces that make up the stack with which we build our apps. But you also said Marcom stack, which is like the marketing communication stack. So I am, I'm not knowledgeable about this at all. So what does that mean, and what are some of the pieces in it?
100%. So a lot of customers that we work with, when we engage in kind of a website build, we're not just looking at the CMS and the website build. We're looking at, for example, what are they doing for email marketing? What are they doing for CRM? And, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on today's show, but, where our agency and most agencies are starting to transition is really that data component to it, right? So what are we doing with the customer data? What are we doing with integration of that data, segmentation of that data, and then what are the tools that they've either already applied or should apply to their organization, such as the HubSpots of the world, the Salesforce.coms of the world. Some smaller customers might be using basic email marketing and so forth. So our role in that is really identifying what tools are going to serve what purpose, and then what is the end result that we're ultimately looking to achieve. And when we're creating that roadmap, Sam, we're really looking at identifying those different applications and how they're being used, and then ultimately, where does Sitefinity fit within all that, right? And what pieces do we pull into Sitefinity? What pieces do we use externally, and create a true, a truly focused customer experience.
Well, okay, yeah, well said. So you mentioned Sitefinity, and this is Chris's ballpark here, but what does Sitefinity purely as a CMS mean to you folks? Like, what does it help you do without all of the other bells and whistles?
Yeah, it's a question that we could probably spend the whole call on, right? So for us, Sitefinity is an interesting play for us because our customer base ranges from enterprise level, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 size customers, down to smaller, sub 100 million in revenue type of customers, right? And what's great about Sitefinity for us is it can play in both those kind of opposite sides of the spectrum. And in both those sides of the spectrum, there might be different use cases for how Sitefinity is actually implemented or used. And so for us, we a lot of times will leverage Sitefinity in terms of almost all of its components, whether it's insights, whether it's email and personalization and so forth. Other customers, maybe through technology requirements, security requirements, personal preference is usually the bigger reason. We might leverage Sitefinity as a true DXP or CMS, but then leveraging a Salesforce.com or a HubSpot to do some of the marketing automation components. So the beauty for us and why Sitefinity continues to be our most dominant CMS in our Rolodex is that versatility, right? And I think we can talk a little bit more about it. I'll kind of pause a little bit, but where Sitefinity is today is not just another DXP, but a CMS that offers enough variety, scalability, security, and power to actually really compete with some of the enterprise level. So we're starting to see in our Rolodex much larger organizations, multi-site, multilingual, personalization, high use of data type enterprise level implementations start to look at some of their legacy kind of technology and look at solutions like Sitefinity to kind of from a speed to market, performance, and actually quite common massive ROI in terms of overall expense. So that's when you talk about where Sitefinity fits with Silvertech, like it's a huge play across the board.
Well said. Okay, so let me ask a trick question here, and maybe both of you can weigh in here.
Yeah.
So let's say I am a small business owner,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a rock star dev on my team who says I can do everything on my own from scratch. I don't need a CMS. I can just build you a website.
Mm-hmm.
What's your play advising people not to try reinventing the wheel?
It's funny. I mentioned at the beginning of this that we've been a partner for quite some time, and back in the day, Silvertech had its own proprietary CMS,
Yep.
like a lot of agencies did, right? And so your question is valid, and it's the same answer as to why we got rid of that CMS. Is that the technology today is changing much more rapidly. And the demand in terms of what, forget the term CMS for a minute, but the demand of what your website actually should be doing continues to increase. So, developing a website from scratch certainly 100% has its purpose. For a small, local business that's just looking for, the basic kind of, I need my address, I need my phone number, I need my menu posted online. But when you're starting to talk about, small to mid-market businesses that are looking to grow and looking to really kind of have what customers expect today, which is that one-to-one conversation, the more personalized experiences, building all of that and then maintaining that is not, it's not financially the right move for one. But then there's other risks that you're introducing that you shouldn't. You just shouldn't be, right? Security, constant update of technology and what's happening. When you're going down a customized approach like that, you're typically going to be integrating with I would think that you might be integrating with other solutions, and you're creating opportunities for things to break in that. So it's just not warranted where when you're going with a platform like Sitefinity that's going through regular updates, regular improvements. And I'll throw you a little bone here. One reason why we consider ourselves or consider Sitefinity such a valued partner is the relationship that we as a partner have with the product and the product team to say, hey, this is what we're hearing from customers. This is what the ask is. And to get that reaction back, that whole value proposition of being on a platform that is scaling with the market and what ultimately the world is asking for is it's invaluable, right? So that's the long-winded salesy version, right? The short answer is definitely risk. You build your entire ecosystem around a custom solution what happens when John Smith or Jane Doe now leave your organization? Let's talk about reality, right? Now you've set yourself up for a complete disaster, because now you're going to ask another engineer. Sam, I'm going to talk to you on this one. You're an engineer. I'm surrounded by them in this building. I've never met an engineer that loves another engineer's custom code quality or approach, right? So you just it's a high risk situation that I don't think in today's market, today's world, it makes a lot of sense.
Chris, anything to add?
No, I agree with that. And I think, it's sort of been played out, especially over the last like 10 to 12 years, where I remember, Jeff, you probably remember this. Remember it was like the Martech 50, something like that. And, but now it's the Martech 5000, the Martech 15,000, right? Because you have all these solutions, right, that are just best of breed. And that's what the DXP world is, right? That's what, Sitefinity is. We're best of breed, out there. So companies have kind of realized that, it's probably not great for me to build it, where I can just, partner with a company like Sitefinity and Silvertech. And ultimately, I'm going to get the best of breed with the security, the upgrades, all that good stuff. And as Jeff mentioned, it's all about risk, and I mitigate all that risk that comes with it. So we've really seen it play out over, looking back on it, and Jeff will probably remember this, you sort of look at areas back in the last 20 years. When I first started out in the CMS world, the biggest competitor was Dreamweaver. That's what people were editing and updating their sites with. And then all these custom solutions came out. There were tons and tons of them, and those have gone away. And really now it's, you see the Sitefinities, dominating the marketplace.
Don't forget Front Page.
Front Page, yep, absolutely.
Back when everybody wanted Cold Fusion and Flash intros to their website. Right? We're all dating ourselves. I think
Cold Fusion.
I thought I was old, and then I met new people.
I've been around. To add to that too, like there, one of the other things that we found with Sitefinity too is that, and Sam, you kind of asked a question around like, a developer building everything kind of from scratch. But, to be very clear, we still work with a lot of organizations that do a lot of customization, right? They have a lot of proprietary custom integration, various things, whether it be, database driven things or things that their form processing stuff is very tuned into their organization. In those scenarios, they may have engineers on staff that are working with that stuff. They may contract with someone like ourselves on that stuff. Sitefinity still plays very well with that. And that's the beauty of it, right? Is to build some of that connection and that customization around it. We do a lot of work in utilities and manufacturing where this is a common thing, right? And so, the goal there is to leverage as much of the core platform as you can and kind of decouple a lot of that customization. And so that way, as the platform, as Sitefinity is being upgraded and kind of moving through the lifespan, it's still creating an environment to where it's not breaking everything around it. So that's one of the kind of the value adds that we see.
That is the challenge, though, Jeff, isn't it? Kind of keeping that core, of any really web content management system, but allowing for customizations. And I think you said it correctly. Sitefinity really allows for those type of customizations. And, quite frankly, I think it's one of the reasons many folks go with us, because you have the core web content management DXP functionality, but every organization is different out there.
And that's a huge. I'm going to plug kind of the partner network here. I mean, it's a huge value of why your core implementation is always, important from a truly certified partner, because that architecture strategy around that setup, Chris, prevents a lot of that risk down the road, right? As opposed to trying to kind of figure it out as you go. And I think, I think that the better you can work with a customer on the power of Sitefinity and understanding their roadmap, the better you can create that initial architecture and that initial setup to where things are set up for success, right, in the long term.
Yeah, well said. behind the scenes, like from an engineering standpoint, like exactly the things you mentioned, like it takes dozens and dozens of engineers just to make sure the core of Sitefinity runs on the latest,
Yep.
.NET or other stacks. And the decoupled architecture is very important to us because you want that flexibility as a
Yes.
customer to, choose a React front end or, Angular or something else and still be able to leverage your core services, your data, and, have that flexibility.
Yeah,
And,
and it's funny, Sam. It's on that note, like when I talked about kind of the two ends of the spectrum of where our customer base is and our customers that are really on Sitefinity, there's the lower end. Everything you just talked about never comes up, right? It's never part of the conversation. It's more of the marketing side of the power of Sitefinity. It's more of kind of the Marcom stack side, insights, the classic CMS, and they want personalization. But as you go more and more upstream and enterprise level, that flexibility from the engineering side becomes so much more important. And it's one of the beauties of the platform, right? Is that like you can kind of cater to both and really achieve those goals.
Yeah. And you mentioned personalization and other things. Like anytime, like devs in the house is great, for your business, but anytime you're having to come to devs to come up with a new landing page or a new personalized way of reaching a certain market, that's not good use of time for anybody.
100%. That's why, like for here at Silvertech, like all our account managers or strategists, they're all trained on Sitefinity, right? So every single one of them can easily help support, personalization, create those pages, create those campaigns, start doing the segmentation for our customers. But I share that not because of our accounts team or our strategy team, but they're not engineers, right? So, the point in that is that we do the same thing for our customers. Our customers can quickly, within a few days, start spinning that stuff up and understanding kind of how they can start creating some personalization tracks for their customer base, and so that's 100%.
All right. So let me ask a different spin-off question here. Do you have customers who have, a lot around their design systems? Like they want, consistency of design across multiple form factors, maybe some that actually do have a lot of designers in the house and they have a nice design system laid out. Or do you folks, build things on your own? So how does that work?
Yeah. So when you say, just for clarity, when you say design, you're talking about like true creative design?
Yeah.
So so I would say that we probably handle about 85-90% of all creative work for most of our customers, right? And so at least on the initial get-go, at least on the initial release. But we certainly have customers that have, there's no question we have a lot of customers that have design standards already in place. They have their brand guides, their brand books, their mood boards, and the kind of the basic stuff, especially as you kind of go up market a little bit. But our approach is very strategic in nature. It is a very data-driven, goals-focused approach when it comes to creative. And understanding, what's going to kind of move the needle, what's going to kind of really kind of lead to conversion. We don't. The nice thing is about Sitefinity is that we don't necessarily worry about the platform in creative. We want to design to the platform, but we don't. It doesn't limit us, And so, we work with brands that are travel and tourism, to public utilities, to federal government, to banks and credit unions, to healthcare, right? So it's kind of all over the spectrum, and each of those kind of verticals has different kind of creative standards, if you will. But we go through a typical agency process, where we go through style tiles and mood boards. We go through wireframing and kind of prototyping in terms of as we kind of go through the process. From a template perspective, the reality of it is that you can actually, within Sitefinity, you can really limit the number of templates. You don't want an environment that's got dozens and dozens and dozens of templates. You want to like really limit that down for ease of maintenance, for ease of kind of maintaining and updating the site. So we go through a typical design process. There are scenarios where customers will provide the designs. Typically, we work with those customers on kind of the wireframing aspect to make sure that we're aligned in terms of goals and functionality. All of that then lends itself into like, what are we going to start to do with like the widgets and modules and so forth, to kind of connect the two, right? Connect the design and the creative process to the tech side of it. So that way, when we're designing, we're also thinking about how this is going to be maintained and how the customer is going to create future templates, landing pages, things like that. So it's a very flexible environment for sure.
Right. Yep.
Curious, Jeff, just on your side, on the creative side, how long does creative take you guys? Like, I know typical customer is always a tough thing, but is it, several months? Is it, you guys are, getting it down by weeks? I'm just curious, like, what does the creative side look like?
Yeah, it does range. It depends on the customer. It depends on the, the severity, like the type of customer too, right? So like, let's just talk, a basic banking website, or a basic, manufacturing site or whatever. Let's stick with banking. Typically it's within a 30-day window, right? When you kind of start, you start through a style tile. So basically what's going to happen is you can go through a strategic process where you're going to do things like personas. You're going to do things like journey mapping. You're going to do content inventory, content strategy. You're going to get to some site mapping. So you've kind of created, an idea of what the site needs to contain. And then from there, you're going to get into, if they have a brand guide, which hopefully they do, you're going to go through that, understand their brand elements, their, kind of where is their brand and how is their brand being used. Then you get into style tiles. Style tiles, we're going to start looking into things like, font treatments, hero treatments, and are very basically, what's our CSS going to start to kind of look like, what our headings going to look like, down to very detailed things such as like what happens on hover state, what happens on click, what happens on submission, right? That gives the customer a foundation for like, here's how things are going to kind of function a little bit as well. Then you get into kind of your wireframing, which really starts to outline the architecture of the site and how widgets and modules are going to be used, where they're going to be used. Through that process, this is where, depending on the customer, it starts to deviate a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Customer that's going to engage in things like personalization, we want to start addressing there. What are we personalizing where? You get into customers that might be multilingual and multi-regional or multi-site. You start to create variations of those wireframes if there's any type of variations in the kind of the experience that's required. And then you get into that template creation. Depending on that process, like I said, you can have design from start to finish kind of go through in a 30-day window, 60-day window. You start getting over that. There's a couple things as a partner that we like to remind our customers on, which is project atrophy, right? And the other piece in project atrophy is content. We can talk about that separately, but the longer that process goes, especially in creative, where it's so judgmental and it's so easy for it to go from us as a project team to an executive team that reviews it with no context. The longer that process takes, the more that atrophy is going to kick in and just kind of make the whole experience not as fun.
Yeah.
All right. So, folks, we have gone about 30 minutes into the show, and we have not talked about the elephant in the room, and that's AI these days. So before we go into anything else, just overall, Jeff, like generative AI, are you like lay it on me, bring it on, or are you like get off my lawn type of a person?
Can you explain what you mean by no? I'm kidding. Yeah, so AI is the elephant in the room. No, I think everybody's talking about it. It's part of every single conference out there, and every single kind of key talk when you're talking about tech stacks, Marcom stack, and so forth. Yes, AI is part of our vision. It's part of our strategy in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, I think there's what one of my my business partner here, Nick, he often uses the term table stakes, right? I think a lot of what is out there today when you talk about AI in terms of websites. You talk about content creation, you talk about SEO creation, starting to get more and more dominant in terms of things like media and ad creation and ad placement and so forth. These are kind of like table stake type of things where I think it's becoming more and more common. I think, with Copilot and ChatGPT, a lot of people are, they have it on their phones now. They're starting to use it in email creation, all that type of stuff. Shoot, when we were at the Safety Global Summit, Anoop Sandhu, our one of our senior directors of engineering, he used ChatGPT to create an entire itinerary for us in Ireland, right? So it's just becoming more and more commonly used. That's part of it, right? Like it's important for us to understand it. It's definitely important for Safety, which is now including a lot of this in core functionality on the platform, which is fantastic for our customers. The real secret and where we're really kind of evolving as an agency and as a partner is the data modeling piece. How are we looking at, a bank or a financial institution and looking at the 4 or 5 different areas of data that they're collecting, and how are we creating those models to create the right type of messaging at the right time, the right segmentation. A lot of that stuff is either manual today or it's trying to kind of comb through it. And so understanding where AI can take that piece of it is certainly where the industry is going, certainly where a lot of the bigger Fortune 100 organizations probably are, or at least are exploring today. We're spending a lot of time right now with our customers on basics around what should their AI roadmap be? How can they use it? Where should they start investing? Starting to put the ROI behind it, and getting them to understand. That's kind of, I would say, like where we're at today with it. But when I say where we're at today, this is going to change in 6 months. We can have the same conversation in 6 months and it'll probably be, vastly different.
Well, you kind of mentioned a couple things there, Jeff, on the AI side. You mentioned, first and foremost, I know you guys work a lot with banks, credit unions, which I've always found to be notoriously slow to adopt, new technology. So I'm kind of curious. I'm sure they're asking you guys about it, AI and how do we use it. Are you seeing much adoption yet of AI, or is it more of just, sort of that bell curve, right? Of like, hey, we're kind of, exploring it right now, but we're just not quite sure.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Using that vertical specifically.
Yeah.
I would say that we're seeing customers use it on the content side.
Yep.
We're seeing customers use it on things like SEO. They're starting to ask for it more in terms of like search and search functionality and things like that. What was really eye-opening to me is I went to a conference in maybe it was in January of this year. And it was for the financial space, and it was a conference. It was a bank director acquire or be acquired conference. So the whole focus was about banks, mostly community banks, but banks in general. Do they need to acquire to continue to grow, especially with today's market? Do they need to be acquired? But what I found fascinating is that most of the tracks and the speaking engagements were tied around data and AI. And it dawned on me that no matter what path these banks are going down, there's a massively increased level of interest on whether you're doing the acquisition or you want to be acquired on your data. And because when a bank is looking to acquire another bank, it's what can they do with that customer base? What can they do from a share of wallet expansion? What can they do from a growth perspective, right? So all these things play in. So what was the other piece that was fascinating to me is that we're not talking about Bank of America. We're not talking about the $100 million asset. $100 billion asset banks. We're talking about 500 million asset banks. A year ago, a 500 million asset bank, to Sam's point earlier, might be the type of bank that's like, I have a developer or I have a friend that can build our website, right? So it's almost like they're leapfrogging from like they need to be the homegrown website build to like a more professional website build. They're kind of leapfrogging that and jumping into kind of understanding what AI is. And so it's part of the reason why we are shifting, because I think customers are going to start spending more around data and AI, and then security, those two pieces really, than traditional kind of like web builds, right? So our challenge is that it's not that web builds go away, it's that the justification of how the web ties into those components is increasingly important. And that's certainly something that we're keeping our eye on.
Okay, so let me ask you a question here. With or without AI, you mentioned data is, it's key. So how do you folks use data for, specific customer insights, segmentation or, personalization on your, communications outreach? So how do you folks use data, and how do you see that world evolving?
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of different types of data, right? There's customer data. So if we're working, I'll stick with the bank or credit union kind of example. If we have member or customer data of a bank, it's really about driving, their digital experiences. So we can do a couple things, right? We can look at their digital experiences, what they're doing on the website, what they're looking at, what they're engaged with, and start to personalize tracks based on that. We can take their internal data sets that is coming from their core, from their internal marketing system that they're using, and say like, well, we know this customer has an auto loan. We know that loan is 6 months from payoff. We should probably start targeting them through email or through text or through personalization on the website. I think those are key pieces of known customer data. Then there's unknown customer data, right? I am shopping for a new Jeep, and I start to kind of price shop, rates and look at who's got the best kind of lending options in my area. As a bank or a credit union, I want to start capturing that as an anonymous user, right? Because if I convert, there might be other historical things that I've looked at or I've kind of engaged with that brand. So how do you start to capture that anonymous user, assign an ID to that anonymous user, but when I convert, then you can start to basically tag all that historical data to me, so you kind of know where I've been and what I've done. And there's third-party data, right? If I start looking at Home Depot and Lowe's, and I go to my local credit union or bank, and I'm looking at their website, well, you might want to, if you can pull that data in, you might want to basically say, hey, here's a HELOC promotion, or here's a home improvement or a personal loan type of promotion, as opposed to like an RV loan on their homepage or a snowmobile loan, right? I mean, we still see banks, credit unions that are advertising snowmobile rates right now. So like, for those that are joining that are in Arizona, yes, in New Hampshire, there is no more snow. So it's, so I think there's those pieces. I think that, there's, again, using the same financial services example, you can grab data from things like Dun & Bradstreet, where you can pull SIC codes. So for example, if Silvertech had engaged with my local bank, well, you would know I'm a technology services company. You would know, my rough asset size. And so you can start to talk about how like you might be the expert in small business lending and so forth. So like there's a lot of ways that we leverage data today, personalization data. But again, this goes back to our lead to loyal philosophy. Like if we're building a website, it's not just the personalization of the website. It's where does email marketing come into that? Where does some of their other marketing campaigns and initiatives come into that? So understanding that entire marketing spend and investment, the digital piece plays a pivotal role in that.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so another question here. So you probably deal with customers across a wide variety of verticals, right, and industries. What parts of your business do you think are reusable? So, like, have you folks come up with your own set of templates or processes or anything that you can see is kind of a common factor that you can use between a bank and something else? So anything that you share?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like there's a handful of basics, right? There's common practices and services. For example, ensuring kind of ADA compliance, right? Like 5 years ago, ADA compliance was hitting up the financial world in a very big way. We know that healthcare HIPAA compliance, but that's really from a data perspective. understanding that now in today's world, things like ADA compliance, believe it or not, we still get RFPs that are asking to make sure that the site is mobile friendly and responsive in nature. So there's general practices there. But I think that there's also general practices around overall performance, site load speed, template utilization, how sites should be architected at a high level. I think are still some important things. There's some general security practices, do's and don'ts, from the engineering team, certainly that they follow. We definitely take a very strategic approach to our customers of making sure it's very much tied to goals and objectives of the organization. So, from a, what we're not is, we don't reuse templates. For example, like if a bank, doesn't like this template, we don't use that same template to the next bank. Now, that idea still exists in the ecosystem. I mean, anybody that tells you that it doesn't that's not true, right? Like, if I designed this for this bank, they didn't like it, and as I'm heading down a strategic path for this bank, I might think about, well, you know what, that would kind of work, or that creative idea would kind of work. But I would say it's very unique in that sense. That said, one thing that we've done is we have spun off a very specific product that we call Kubera that is built on the Sitefinity platform. And the reason why we did this is that we come across banks and credit unions of all sizes. And one thing that we've learned is that a $100 million, $200, $400 million, or even $500 million credit union or bank wants everything they heard at that last trade show, right? They sat in about personalization. They sat in about ease of use. They sat in about performance. So we built a product called Kubera that utilizes, and we basically built shared components that all banks and credit unions ultimately use: rates, locations, alerts, landing pages, and so forth, like all the basic fundamentals. And the idea behind this is it's essentially giving them the power of Sitefinity and the flexibility of Sitefinity in more of a managed service application, right? So rather than them have to invest whether it's, 150,000, 200,000, 300,000, whatever it might be, it allows them to get in something that's a few $1,000s a month with a much lower setup fee, but gives them the flexibility and the functionality to have personalization, to have a Gartner rated and evaluated content management system that's going to last them for 10 plus years into the future. So in that sense, we kind of created a product to suit a certain market segment that we wanted to ultimately get into that Sitefinity world, into that kind of leading edge world that allows them to compete with those bigger brands.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned a few things that really aren't a choice anymore, like security, accessibility. I mean, you just have to think about these things. And on the dev side, like these are not easy things to pull off engineering wise, because it takes a lot of effort across multiple teams. You mentioned ADA and HIPAA. This year in summer, European Union is getting, they've had some regulations, but they're getting what's called the European Accessibility Act. So, both public and private sector, anybody pretty much who does business in EU now has to conform. So, hopefully people are not waiting for the regulations, but now you are, even incentivized to fall in line.
Yeah.
Security breaches are not fun, so it's takes a village to make sure everything is tied up. And
well, and it's funny, we're lucky. We're at a good enough size here at Silvertech where we have in-house counsel, and one of the jobs of in-house counsel is to actually analyze exactly that, Sam. What is happening in Europe typically then starts to work its way to California. What happens in California typically starts to work its way east, right, is the best way to put it, right? Whether it's ADA, whether it's GDPR, whether it's other regulations. We also do some work up in Canada. Nova Scotia Power, which is built on Sitefinity, is one of our longstanding customers. We have global customers that have presence in Europe, APAC, and so forth. And so one of the jobs of our council is to keep an eye on that, watch that, work with our strategy engineering and account teams and notify them. So as we're working on certain scenarios, certain customers, we do bring that up. Actually, we talk about what's happening, where we're taking things, where our recommendations would be, and whether they want to kind of get ahead of the game is typically kind of where we like to be. You know, if it's not impactful to their goals, if it's not impactful to the overall experience, you know, we're a fan of like, let's get ahead of it and do what's right by the customer, set them up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you one more thing here. You know, as we evolve our tech stacks and our marketing stacks, what do you see in your customer base between people who want to keep stuff in-house, like on-prem, within their firewalls, versus the type of customer or industries which are more open to you host our stuff, like so cloud managed, you know, SaaS services. So where do you see people in your spectrum?
We have a managed services practice. We do a lot of the hosting ourselves. Most customers aren't bringing it into their environments anymore. Those days have definitely faded away for the most part. You know, they're either in their own tenant of Azure or AWS or something like that. So there's a couple of scenarios. If they have the tenant, they want a managed services partner, we can do that. We can put it into our Azure or AWS environment, and then it's a full service and as we like to say, one throat to choke environment. But what's interesting is that Sitefinity has evolved into you know a SaaS PaaS type of model and cloud model themselves. It does give us the opportunity to kind of offer that additional opportunity, and some customers prefer that, right? So there's a few value propositions there. One is it's tied to the platform directly if Progress is maintaining it. You know, two, it depends on their risk mitigation and their risk evaluation process, right? Sitefinity, part of Progress Software, you guys are a slightly larger organization than Silvertech is, right? So there's a reduced risk perspective there. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're giving the customer the opportunity, but I definitely think the days of them bringing it into their own prem or on-prem within their environment, those days are, you know, managing hardware is over for the most part, right? It's a matter of preference to ultimately who they want to maintain it. And that varies drastically, right? Based on not just size, you know, but you know, the customer infrastructure, their history, like, you know, how have they grown up, right? Have they grown up kind of with this internal large scale IT team? But I will tell you, more customers are shedding that responsibility altogether, whether it's through a Silvertech or it would be direct through Progress. They're definitely shedding that and looking for more of an outsource model that can have a pulse on kind of security and performance and just kind of being able to service them and support them better.
Yeah, well said. Well, I mean, time flies when we are having a good conversation. We're already 50 minutes coming up to the top of the hour. So a couple of parting things for you here, Jeff. Here's your opportunity maybe to, help out Chris with something that he can take back to the product team. So your favorite Sitefinity feature or subset of features that you like, and then also I'm going to throw Chris under the bus here. What is something that you would really like us to do that you haven't seen us do yet?
So who wants? I guess I can start. What do I like most about the product? Right. I go back to my kind of one of my opening statements. I think it is a versatile. So first of all, you know, we didn't really talk about it much, but you know, one thing that is key to us is that we primarily only support platforms that are rated by Gartner, right? And Sitefinity is a highly rated platform, and I go back to one of my initial statements that's versatile enough to really cater to that small mid-market, but powerful enough to really kind of blow the doors off from an enterprise level. And for us, for our engineering team, for our customer base, that is a huge win. You know, I feel that the price points and the value that you get for the price points that Sitefinity offers is top notch. And you know, so I think that's a huge win. I think the other piece that we oftentimes talk to our customers about is I think Safini is ahead of the game when it comes to things like insights, and kind of the data analytics piece of it is a huge value add to our customers to understand and start doing the segmentation and the understanding of the kind of the data that's happening through the digital properties. I think that's a big win for us. And whether it's Silvertech manages that piece for the customer, or the customer kind of wants to take on ownership of that internally, it gives them that flexibility. Whether they use it day one or not, I think is key. I think that the other piece I'll add, and I know you asked for one thing, but I think the other piece that I'll add is that the platform, whether it's to technology users or it's to marketers, is very easy to comprehend and dig their feet into. And I think that is a big win in today's landscape. I mean, there's a lot of different DXPs and a lot of different CMSs out there, and we'll demo 2, 3, 4 sometimes to a customer, and more times than not, Safini kind of wins in that usability piece.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And yeah, these are things our engineering teams love to hear. But your wish list of something that you wish we did.
My wish list? That's a tough one, Sam. I'm not prepared to answer that. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head.
No, that's fine. You can come back to Chris.
I'll have to think about that one.
Yeah. All right. So, it's fun times to live in. AI is all over. We have very matured solutions to, meet customer needs. So, what does your immediate future look like, personally, as well as for Silvertech? Like, what's in your horizon for the next, 1 year, 5 year? What are some things you're looking forward to?
I think for us, I think it's continuing to expand our data capabilities, working with our customers on really kind of, diving into data roadmaps, data strategy. I think that's going to not just help them where they want to be, but it's going to help them leverage the tools that they've already invested in, right? We're currently focused on continued growth in our key verticals and beyond that. And so, I think it's just for today, it's continuing kind of where we're at. I think for the next year, it's truly expanding that data team and kind of the capabilities for our customers there.
Yeah, wonderful. And then, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jeff, what do you see as over the next, say, a couple of years? What are the bigger challenges do you see for the digital agency industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges are, I think a customer. I think you talk. I guess the question you're talking really about a volume question, right? Because there's always going to be customers that need that pure engineering, pure development need, right? But I think when you look at kind of the ecosystem of agencies today, it's becoming much more strategic. It's becoming, I think customers are less dependent on the tech and more dependent on the strategy to achieve their goals, right? And the strategy is key. And it's not just strategy is kind of the your brand should look like and and all that, but it's about how do they take data, leverage data, and achieve the results. I mean, I think more customers in today's economy, especially in this, hopefully it's a short-term window, but if this economy, the way it is now, continues, it is going to be about efficiency. It's going to be about cost savings. And so I think the opportunity is good for companies like us, Silvertech, and for Progress to look at some of the kind of the legacy enterprise level customers that have been spending hundreds of thousands a year in licensing, for example, hundreds of thousands a year in maintenance. Find ways that they can basically reduce those costs dramatically, but gain the same performance, if not easier to use environment and product.
Yeah. That is all very well said. Yeah. And we sure are glad to have partners like you folks who, carry our message and, build solutions and, delight your customers. So, thank you for all that you do.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. And Chris, any parting words?
No, I just want to thank Jeff for coming on today. This was great. And, I will put a plug in there for Silvertech, who is our 2-time back to back Digital Agency of the Year. And Jeff,
Thanks, Chris.
I think this is your 4th year as a champion.
No, believe it or not, this is this is only my second.
Oh, your second year. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think Derek is like a 4 or 5 year MVP, and then or champion, and then Nope became a champion this year, and he was the developer of the year, right?
Developer of the year as well too. So yep, Noop had
I had
a
my
great
own
year.
plug. I plugged a Noop on that one. So
yeah, no, he'll be happy. No, we appreciate that.
Exactly.
Appreciate everything you guys do for the community and for the customers as well. So
likewise, guys. You guys are a fantastic bunch, and love being a partner.
Yeah, and thank you for taking time out of your precious day to come and hang with us. So we love you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Likewise, Sam. Nice hat.
Thank you. Yeah. East. All right, folks. I think that's the show from us. Yep, and we'll see you around on the next stream. Take care. Yeah, bye.
Take care,
bye, everyone.